Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks so much for listening. If you're still listening, this is episode 3. I have my friend Adam Pitts on for this episode. But real quick, I want to make a shout out to my buddy Carl Wiggers, who loaned me some mics and a little recorder. Things are sounding a lot better now. Hopefully your ears are no longer bleeding from the bad audio. So thanks a lot, Carl, for making things sound nice. So Adam Pitts is a real estate agent and broker, and he flips houses and apartment complexes. He's an investor. And so I, of course, really wanted to hear about all of those things. We probably went too far in the weeds, actually, for the first 30 minutes of this episode. So if you're not interested in real estate, just skip that part or make it through the first 30 minutes. And I promise we get into some really cool stuff. He talks about climbing mountains, and which he's done a few times. He talks about being a parent, which I am about to be, so that was great to hear. We even talk about life itself and the legacy that he wants to leave behind. I thought it was really great, and we recorded this episode actually in his office, and he's got some inspirational quotes on the wall in his office. And sometimes some people are like, motivational quotes, like, what do they really do? But it was really cool to hear him actually talk about his life in a way that lines up with these quotes, and him not even realize really that was happening. So somebody that lives out what they talk about is cool. And it was really cool to hear about some of the things that he's worked on, is working on, and plans to do in the future. So thanks again, Adam, for your time. I appreciate you sharing a little bit with me, and hopefully all of you out there enjoy this episode. So I guess we could start, and you could possibly give me, I already am familiar with your background, but for people listening, all 11 people listening, give a little bit of what you've been doing for the past 10 years of your life and what you're doing now, I guess.
11's pretty good for only having your third podcast.
Third episode, 11 listeners.
Man, that's some good scaling right there. What was the question? I was marveling at your
Adam,
subscription.
Who are you?
Okay. Who am I? Well, I'm a real estate investor, I guess. Real estate guy. I guess investor's probably too basic. So, but no, basically my wife and I flip houses and do rental properties, and also run a real estate brokerage. So we do pretty much all things real estate. So mainly flipping old historic houses that most people are scared of, that most people don't want to touch. That's kind of become our little niche,
nice,
so to speak.
Wow. Okay. This is like a common question. How did you get started in real estate investing?
Well, I got started first, little backstory, I never wanted to own a house. I was convinced that if I owned a house, I would be too tied down. And so when we got married, I was telling my wife, Abby, that I only ever wanted to rent. And she thought that was silly. And so we ended up, long story short, I ended up getting my real estate license because I was looking for a job change. And then once I got into real estate sales, I started working with real estate investors. And then through that process, someone privately came to Abby and said they had some cash and they'd always wanted to flip a house. And Abby had also always wanted to flip a house. And I had learned about flipping through these various real estate investors, and one of them canceled a contract on a house he was going to flip. And so I said, well, we have some money, and here's a house that I thought was a good deal for the investor. I guess we should put this money where our mouth is. So we bought our first place.
When was that?
2014.
Okay. Did you sell it for profit?
Yeah, we made like $20,000.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
We had no clue what we were doing, but we made some money.
That's always good. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to make $20,000.
Hey.
All right. So I want to, as we're talking, I'm pretty familiar with what you're doing and stuff. So I wanted to just get down in the weeds as much as possible.
Let's do it.
Because I'm super selfish and I don't care what people want to hear.
You don't know.
I want to ask you.
It's Chase doesn't know.
Exactly. The whole reason that we're here is an excuse for me to ask you detailed questions. So first of all, I want to know, how in the world do you find a house that you think has the ability to make you profit? Where do you start at?
Well, you start with knowledge. If you don't have knowledge, you can't. If you don't have personal knowledge, I would find it much riskier to do what we do, because like if you were just counting on agents giving you deals, agents come to you all day. I have agents still come to me all day long telling me they have some great deal and it's a horrible deal. Agents are not good at telling you if it's a good deal or not. They just want to sell a house. So I mean, for me though, as an agent, obviously I look on MLS a lot, but I don't really find them because I looked. I find them because I know value, so that as I look, I can instantly analyze value in the areas that we're looking at. So I find them through knowledge, and then I use that knowledge and apply it in the places that the information I need is at, if that makes sense.
So what's the value that you're looking for though?
If it's a really old house, I like to buy them for roughly 40% of what I can resell them for.
And the resale is like, that's just where your knowledge comes in. Like, how do you know what you can actually sell it for?
Knowledge. You know? I mean, of course I'll pull comps from MLS and whatever, but I mean, haven't done it for several years, and we pretty much do most of them in the same areas. So I have a pretty good bead on what stuff will sell for. And I mean, it's a certain gambling aspect of it too. You don't really know what you can sell it for. You think you know what you can sell it for.
So you buy it for 40%, and then
40%. I mean, if you were doing a house in like Broadmoor or some like ranch style house, you probably don't need that sort of discount. But for old houses and the way that we do them, we don't cut corners, so we pretty much replace everything, and so that gets really expensive. You know, you pretty much can't do an old house properly. Unless you're lucky, you can't do an old house properly for less than $100,000.
Wow. So the 40% discount that you're buying from the resale value, not from the current value, but so like, let's say if you buy it, you do get it at 40%. What's the percentage of the value you spend on renovating it? Like, what's left over after you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll try to be. I guess probably an example would be the best starting point. And it's not 40% is the goal. I'll normally end up buying them at like 50% of what I can resell them for. You just have to be careful. So like if I were to buy one, when I analyze the deal, I'll see the property first, and then I say, okay, how much can I resell this for? And of course we look at price per square foot. And so if I say, well, I can resell it for $300,000 and it's 1,500 square feet. So I'm at $200 a foot. So I know if it's an old house, in my perfect world, I'm going to be buying it for less than $100 a foot. And yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, I use super simple math. 300, I need to be less than 150 buying it.
And if you can't get it, then you just move on. You're not getting hung up on.
Yeah. I love deals, and I have a really bad habit of getting excited about the deal and then like once you get the deal, you still have to do the work.
Right.
And so to me, there's one cardinal rule of thumb, which we now have kind of made, like, it really should be on the wall with these other quotes. It should be, it's better to miss a deal than lose money on a deal, which sounds common sense when you start buying these properties. For one, they're hard to find. And so you are compelled to want to make deals work. But having done a few now where I've worked on them for months and months and months, in one case almost a year and a half, and then you lose money on it, that's the worst. Because it's not like once you start the deal, you can just bail. Once you have it and you're doing it, you're in. And so much better to pass than make a mistake.
Okay, I have a couple train of questions coming off of that. What have you lost? How many times, like, what's your batting average on losing money and making money?
Well, with the way we run our business, sometimes losing money is a little subjective, because there's been some that's been really tight, but we fund a lot of our bills. We just roll them into reno costs, like car notes and stuff like that, as business expenses.
Breaks even, technically it made
me money.
Yeah, okay.
Right, or it may have paid a salary for me for a few months. But just on paper, there's been 2 that we've lost money on.
Okay.
And one of those was like
close.
Yeah.
How many have you done?
I won like my 20th.
Oh wow. Okay.
Ish. Yeah. So we have a very good
18 of 20.
Average.
I'd say that's a very high batting average.
Yeah.
Nice.
Definitely. Yeah. That's something something positive, you know?
Okay, so I promise if you're listening, we won't get too deep here for a second. I'll start asking some other stuff. But so when you close on a house, and let's say like, I don't know, it's like an old house. What's like your plan? I know you're a contractor now. So how much of it are you like going in and taking walls out yourself? And how much, I mean, do you start making phone calls immediately and setting up contractors? Like what's the actual process of starting the construction?
Yeah, so the process, which we're always trying to improve our process, especially if we're trying to take on more projects now. But the real process is as soon as you get it under contract, you start bringing, you first have to figure out what layout you're going with for the most part, and then we'll start bringing out contractors, foundation guys, HVAC, plumber, my sheetrock guy, some of the stuff I can estimate myself just from experience,
So you're doing, as far as like the cost and budgeting for a deal, do you kind of in your head or on paper calculate how much you're going to spend to these, because you got to pay these contractors and sometimes they end up costing more than you expect. Like what's the plan for that at the beginning?
I try to bring, that's why the clearer scope of work you have on the front end, the less change orders you should have during the process, So I don't really, there's always some estimate that's going to change, but I'm pretty good now at ballparking. Like there's a house we're about to close on and it needs a whole new roof, and it's like a big roof project. And in my head looking at it, I said, I bet we can probably get a quote for about 18. And I got two quotes, both right at 18. So you do it a few times and you can start kind of estimating. And I had also created a spreadsheet where I calculated cost from previous projects and then just did some quick math to kind of figure out what my vendor's average like cost per foot or cost per whatever was. And then I made it where I can plug in those numbers on my next projects and it'll spit out approximately what their bids will come in at.
Gotcha.
So just stuff like that. But it's more of an art than a science for these types of jobs.
I guess because you could always change your plan on like what you might actually do if something doesn't come out back priced where you expected.
Yeah, it will always cost more than what you want it to.
That's what I've literally been involved in 0 construction projects in my life, but from looking at them from the outside, I'm very much now. I realize now that all the projects cost more and take longer than you originally planned.
Yeah,
seems like that's always the case.
It will never be cheaper and it will never be faster, no matter what you do.
So okay, backing out a little bit, I want to talk a little bit because you're a business owner and you've been. Technically, as a realtor, you're a business owner because you're kind of like your own thing.
Right.
So you've been a business owner for like what, 10 years?
No, or
you're old
7
now.
years.
So,
I know time
years.
does pass, but yeah, I guess 7 years.
And so we're sitting in your office right now, and you've got quotes on the wall here from like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Georgia Dare. So, what is your approach now that you've been working for yourself for 7 years? How do you balance your 30-year goal and then like I need to go take down this wall in this house? Like what's your daily thoughts and planning kind of around that stuff?
Well, initially I want all my goals realized now.
Right.
But that's really not the right way of viewing things. You really have to take little steps to get there. So now the part, like for years, like when we first got into flipping, I knew nothing about construction, like zero. My degree was not in construction. It's not like I had no knowledge, but I had a degree or anything. I knew nothing. So over the years, I've learned a whole lot, up in February, getting both my contractor's licenses. So I've learned enough, and now I'm trying to transition from the point of swinging hammers to managing the projects. Because at this point, before my knowledge base wasn't there, to be able to walk through a job and like know if people were doing things the right way or cutting corners or whatever. Now that the knowledge is there, I need to switch my role from a job that I could be paying someone else $15 an hour to do into a management role so that I can grow and now begin to build the structure to actually build something larger versus like, just doing a few projects a year. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's hard for me because I'm very task oriented. So I'm like, this wall needs to come down today. And there always is that, but we recently hired somebody and kind of hired 2 people. And so we hired them with the understanding that it requires me to extricate myself from the daily activities as much as I can. Otherwise, hiring people doesn't make any sense.
So what you're doing now, you're kind of trying to scale and grow into a larger construction company type. Not a construction company, but you want to be able to do a lot of projects at once.
Not a construction company. We're trying to scale so we can do more at once, of course, make more money, but also just for more flexibility. Like, I didn't become a business owner to sit in 110-degree houses swinging hammers. I became a business owner to make money, create jobs for people, and allow myself to pursue other things I'm really also interested in. So for me, the organization side of it now has more to do with, obviously we had our business ventures. And so it's like, I want this organization so that these profitable flip ventures can continue, but there's a process so that now mentally I can be expanding into trying to get other things going too, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And you can't do that without, the structure, and I can't pursue other things if I don't have income coming in. So it was like, in my head, it's like, okay, big 30-year goal, we have all sorts of stuff. I still would love to have like a tech company, all this stuff, but how do I pay for it in the meantime? So I kind of had to rewind to create some stable income.
So you have, how many people work at your brokerage now, or licensed at your brokerage?
I just have, I think, 7.
And then how many people are helping you, your wife, Abby? And then is there anyone else currently, like the 2 people that you just hired, are they in the flip business with you, working for you?
Yeah, one of them is salaried, and he's eventually going to take on like property management, project management. Right now, he's just kind of boots on the ground.
Okay. So I'm asking because I was going to ask, what's your theory, or what knowledge have you gained in the past 6, 7, 8 years, and what's your theory going forward on building a team to accomplish what your plan is?
What's my theory on building a team?
I'm curious to know how you manage people doing different things at once, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not great at delegation. Like, my life experience has shown me oftentimes it's in my head. I'm like, it's easier to do it myself. And so sometimes I'm not very patient, like with training people or whatever. So I move like very quick. I'm like big picture. So man, you could say, hey, Adam, go start a company. And that would be all the direction I would need. I would just go figure out what kind of company and I would just roll with it, But train it, you can't really hire someone and expect them to act like that, And so for me, it's been my struggle. Back when I had a separate real estate team, we hired an admin, and I was terrible at delegating stuff. She would just do work for the other person I worked with because I wasn't giving her work. And so for me, the struggle with building a team is actually being patient enough to train them and being trusting enough to offload to them, because I just have I feel like I'm a pretty capable person, and so I have a tendency to just want to hang on and do it myself, and you can't grow a team like that.
So I'm very much the same way. So give me a tip. What have you learned? It's like, how can you help me get better at delegating stuff? Do you have any secrets?
I don't have any secrets, but what I have learned thus far is like, I think it has more to do with, obviously there's a baseline of like whoever you're delegating to has to be capable of doing it. Like if you're trying to code something, you're not going to delegate it to me. And so in my world, recognizing like the guy we hired, Nate, like he is competent. He has a different personality type than me, but he is competent in what I'm asking him to do. And so I just need to trust him to accomplish it, and also make sure that in the delegation that I have taken the 10 minutes of necessary prep time to make sure he has the information he needs to accomplish it. Because sometimes it's a conversation Abby and I have a lot, because I'm so big picture. I just assume everyone else is like that. Whereas a person you're delegating to, or maybe a member of your team versus you as the leader of your team, the member of your team probably has a different personality than you. And that's probably a good thing, because it probably means they want to be the team player, not the team leader. And so recognizing that that everyone isn't the same as me, it's like such a novel thought. Recognize everyone's not the same as me, and therefore, like, the personality type of a good team member, someone that you actually can trust to delegate things, they just need a couple minutes of giving them information. And then I oftentimes find it's most helpful for me to leave. So like I tell them what I need done, and then I leave so that I don't just end up doing it. And then when I get back later in the day, it's just magically all done really well.
Nice.
And so that helps me slowly improve.
So is this quote on the wall the biggest thing? Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So is it just the fear of giving someone a task to do that's the burden or the hurdle to overcome?
Yeah, it probably is a very relevant quote for that. I wouldn't have thought of it in that perspective, but yes, I honestly, it's a good thing to say, because I have really big goals. It literally will never happen without me letting go of the fear of like delegating, and the fear, they won't do it right, because I can't do it by myself. And side note, I don't know if you watched the show, what's it called? Billionaire something. This billionaire guy, and he relocates to Erie, Pennsylvania, but they relocate him with like $100 to his name or $200 to his name, and he has 90 days to build a business gets valued at $1 million.
Wow. And
the 90 days is kind of silly, and I think there was some outside coordination. But if you watch the show, what you learn about the guy is, not hating on him, but one, he's not like, in this context, out of his element of billionaire, he's not like super great. Like, he sucked at sales. He just was kind of all over the place. But what he was a master at was getting other people to do stuff, and not in like he's using them. Like, he had a mission, like where he was going, and he was able to build this vision around it. I'm sure the television cameras helped, but he was really good at like, hey, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it kept people bought in. And that's what I took away, was like the importance of being able to cast a vision. And then, he just kind of delegated. And then if they asked him if they wanted to do it, if they said yes, then he delegated. And if they were sucking, he let them know that they were sucking, and that to me was like the biggest takeaway.
Cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a good thing to think through. It's like, you can't do it without a team. So like, why not let the team do it? Set them up to do it.
And also, like, I think the other thing, I'm like a big people pleaser. And so in my mind, I forget sometimes, like, if you delegate and the person actually does suck, you can just fire them. Like, it's not like you're stuck with them. Yeah. So if you delegate and they don't do what you needed them to do, you can move on. It's not like, so there's no harm in delegating, and that's what's hard for me. It's like, oh, wait a minute. If my stuff's not getting done the way I want it to, I am the owner of the business. Therefore, it has to be done the way I want it done. And if you're not doing it, I can find someone else that will.
Okay, so the business, what do you have happening at the moment? What are you working on?
Well, we have a 3,000 square foot house we're renovating. We're personally going to move into. I have a 14 unit apartment renovation, which is meandering its way to starting construction. And then we have 2 other flip houses that we're about to take on. And then we have an office that we're sitting in that we rent out the bottom. And then we have the other half of the apartments we rent out, and a single family house we rent out. And we're going to rent out my current house.
Cool.
So whatever all that is. Oh, and I have a couple lots I'm selling.
And you have lots.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about the apartment complex that you have, because this seems like first of all, it seems like an awesome deal that you found, which is cool, and seems like a logistical nightmare. But now, I know you recently told me that if your plan happens, then at some point very soon, it will basically be, to use a cliche, is like cash cow. I mean, right. It will set you up to basically fund almost everything that you need, and then everything else you're doing is going to be to make just profit. So,
right.
Talk me through this What exactly is it? And then like, how'd you find the deal? And then I want to just ask questions, I guess, as we go, I guess.
For it. All right. So it's a 28 unit. Well, it is designed to be a 28 unit apartment complex. We got it right at a year ago, and we were looking for we had a duplex. We were looking to kind of dip our toe in like larger multifamily. So we were looking for maybe like 8 to 10 units. And in my looking, I just happened to notice this one because it's right outside of LSU. It borders LSU's property, and but it was 28 units. But we always like things that need a little bit of work, and so the description said it just needed cosmetic work. So I was like, well, 28 units. It's kind of my personality. It's 28 units. We were looking for 8. It's 28. All right, let's just see if we can make it work. You know. So we wrote up. We wrote up an offer for the 28 unit, and there was another sixplex the same guy owned. And so we thought we would just kind of sneak the sixplex in as part of the deal and just see if we could kind of send it under his radar, you know? And, but it was listed, I think total was listed for like $850 between the two of them. And we wrote up we ended up under contract. I'm going to mess up the numbers. We were at like $700,000. Well, when we actually, a lot of apartments, when you buy them, you can't look at them ahead of time.
Okay.
So, because they don't want there's so many people that say they're investors and they'll never buy anything. So they don't want random people looking at units, spooking tenants. So you always have to write up an offer first, and then you renegotiate after you look at it. So we went and looked at it. About 2/3 of the complex was gutted. It was and not like pretty dry, ready to go gutted. It was like moldy sheetrock still hanging. It was like something catastrophic seemed to have happened. And so I was like, man, there's no way I can spend this kind of money. I thought this was like carpet and paint, you know? So we immediately told the seller, like, hey, we can't do this unless we're half of this price. So we have to be $350. This place is falling apart. Thought he would just laugh at us, but he agreed. So he said, all right, I'll lower it to $350. So then at this point, I didn't have my commercial contractor's license. So I was bringing commercial guys through, and they were all telling me like, dude, you need to run. This place is a money pit. It's going to bankrupt you. This is way too much. And whenever someone tells me that, like if you tell me that,
yeah,
I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
Because I had this little chip on my shoulder. I'm going to prove you wrong. And so my wife and I, we walked around it. Being spiritual people, we would prayer walk around it, like, Lord, are we about to make a mistake? But it just felt like, man, it's falling in our lap, you know? Well, we still weren't comfortable at the 350 point because it was going to be about $1 million project all in all. And it said, well, if I'm going to do $1 million worth of work, I better end up with a lot of equity in it, obviously. And so we were at 350, I just felt like it was going to be tight value-wise when it was done. So we went back to the seller. I'm like, man, every contractor's telling me to run. The only way I can buy this place is if I pay you $4,000 per unit, which came out to, between the two properties, came out to $136,000. Again, thought that he was just going to laugh at us, be like, you've lost your mind. Well, to our shock, he accepted it. And so we bought 34 units for $4,000 a piece, $136,000 total on this property that was listed between the two of them for $850. Deal of a lifetime.
No doubt.
I've had so many people bring me to coffee wanting to hear about what I did for this deal. It was the only way I could literally describe it, be like the Lord just dropped it in our laps. Like, here you go, take this one. And it's, so yeah, that's how we got it. And then we actually, one more smart move, we took the sixplex, we put about $20,000 worth of work into it. Put a new roof, new windows, and gutted it, and then resold it to an investor from California for $100,000.
Wow!
Took the $100,000 and paid down the principal on our apartments, and so we netted $80,000. So we ended up essentially paying $56,000 for the apartment
for 28
complex,
units.
For 28 units that touch LSU.
Wow!
Yeah,
that's crazy. So what did you say the magic trick was for that?
Prayer.
So then you have 28 units, and then what's the actual $1 million project? Have you spent $1 million on this?
I've spent $1 million. I've spent about 500.
Okay. All right. So quick side question, and then we'll come back to the apartments. How do you finance $500,000 of work, construction work? Do you have a private investor to do it?
We walk around the parking lots looking for coins. No, we have just a local bank that I developed a good relationship with the lender.
So you do construction loans to finance the project.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it like a business pitch? Like you have a relationship with them now, but if somebody wants to do something like this, do they have to go into a banker and basically have the whole thing, like a business plan laid out? They make the pitch and they say yes or no, or?
I doubt many banks would loan you on these apartments unless you were like super well qualified, like had a bunch of cash
like
reserves
you had a bunch
or something,
of money, yeah.
right? And that has not been us. But I mean, I think it's just that this particular banker was a combination of things. I was good friends with a friend of his, and so I got to meet, use them on some smaller deals, developed a good reputation with him, and just kind of the perfect storm,
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the person. We've been very fortunate because we've been able to use this program for 80% of what we've done, and just some of the nuance of his program. Most of the properties that we've flipped, we haven't had to put. We have no investor partner, and we haven't had to put any of our own cash into it. And so it's like, whatever your return is on zero money invested.
Yeah.
So it's like infinite return, but it's just been beneficiaries of a really great loan program.
So I have like two sides of the question on how you planned and your because you're still currently renovating the apartments.
We're about to start phase 2,
which is the second half of
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So two questions you could answer them at the same time, I guess, is at the beginning of you now close on the apartment complex. You've got the money side, and then you've got the work side of this plan to renovate. What do you do? And maybe this might be super in the weeds, but I'm curious. How do you plan? How many people were in the apartment complex when you bought it, like renting?
Essentially 5.
Okay, so it's kind of lower.
Yeah.
So how do you plan on the renovations? Like, what's the steps? What steps did you have to go through? Like, what was needed, and then what contractors did you need to do it, and then how did you move the people around to renovate?
Well, so the 5 that were in there, we just left them alone. We just left them in their units, and they weren't paying very much. They were paying old rent rates, which we've still left them at, just because, in my mind, they suffered through the complex looking like a complete hellhole, and so it's like, well, if you were going to be patient through that process, I'll let you stay at your low rent amount. So really, we were only ever dealing with empty units. The first half we did was pretty much just cosmetic stuff, like some sheetrock work, new roof, air conditioners, that kind of stuff. But the second half is the scary half.
That's the half that was like falling apart.
Yeah.
And that's what you're about to start.
Yeah. And it's just been slow because we had to redo the financing for like round 2. And then our architect had to draw everything out. And then this commercial had to go through, with the city and figure out what's going to be grandfathered as far as code, what we're going to have to change, all those weird nuancy things, you can make or break a project. So I'm actually excited about the second half, because on one where it's like, if you look in this room, if you can see like water damage everywhere and like mold, but you couldn't see into the wall, you're not going to really know what you're getting into. And so there's a lot of unknown. Whereas at the other side, it's studs, I have blueprints for it all. So all my subs should be able to give me pretty exact pricing on everything. And so I'm curious to do one where it's like, it should be predictable theoretically. Mm-hmm. Like nobody should come on the job
see
and
how
be like,
accurate
hey,
you
darn.
are.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we had to rewire. It's like, no, your bid is to rewire everything.
Mm.
So I'm excited to try it. A little nervous because there's going to be this certain amount of time that the project is completed. So therefore, I have $1 million loan, but I don't have occupancy yet. And so there's going to be this awkward, hopefully short period of time where I have a finished, expensive complex, but only 50% occupancy. So I'm a little nervous about that window of like
getting people.
Yeah.
And then, so then the money side, and then I promise we'll go to something a little less. There's somebody listening like, why are they even talking about this? But I'm interested still. So the money side, like when you go get a commercial loan, like you lay out the project and say, I need this amount of money. And then what's the process? Do they just give you $500,000 and then you have to put it in an account and then spend it wisely? Or like, what's the...
No, so they do an appraisal subject to all the work you say you're going to do. And then they'll loan me 80% of whatever that appraised value is. And then I make draws from that. So like, as I need money, I email the bank. I say, hey, I need to pay my window people and
Gotcha.
deposit for HVAC. I need $50,000. Then they put $50,000 in the account.
Gotcha.
And then they also send a bank, like an appraiser inspector, to come make sure that the items I said I was doing are getting done. So to make sure I'm not just drawing money and going on a trip.
So are you going to, let's say 10 years from now, you do have like a bunch of money saved up from profits on successful deals. Are you still going to go through a bank to do work like that? Or would you then use your personal money to kind of avoid all of the checks and balances that the bank has to do that probably slows you down some?
Yeah.
And not pay
It would
interest.
just depend on the deal. You know, a lot of people will buy it with cash and then refinance, like cash out their money later, but it would just depend. Sometimes you need to buy it with cash, like just for flexibility. And then sometimes it's like maybe the seller's not in a huge hurry. And so you can just go a slower route, you know, so it just depends. I mean, the beauty of using a bank is you always get the leverage, you know, so like I mentioned, if I'm putting no money into it and my return is whatever, $10,000 a month, then it's literally an infinite rate of return, you know, whereas if I had to put $1 million cash into it and now I'm getting, you know, $100,000 a year out, that's still fine, but it's only 10%. Yeah. So,
which is what's a good, do you know, like what's a good rate of return for?
It's all subjective to a million different things.
Okay. Pivot, segue, not a good segue, but bailing. We'll probably come back to the real estate stuff because it's interesting. You just posted, which actually was perfect timing for us getting together and chatting. But you just posted a picture on Facebook of a mountain peak.
Yes.
So let's talk about mountain climbing. What's so great about mountain climbing?
What's so great about mountain climbing? I've always loved mountains. So, and I've always gone places with mountains. So I think some of it's just growing up around them, you know, and then just
growing up around them.
What?
Where'd you grow up around mountains?
Well, I lived in South America for 3 years in the middle of the Andes in Bolivia. And then in my teenage years, I was traveling to Nepal pretty much every summer. So, you know, obviously the Himalayas and Andes, there are no mountains taller than those.
Right. I was about to say, you were not in Louisiana if you're growing up around mountains.
So I didn't technically grow up around them. I spent 3 years around them and then each summer around them. So the mountains, it's like one of those things. I did a climb in 2014, right around when we started flipping houses. Actually, when I was climbing the mountain, Abby was having to finish the flip. So she finished our first flip while you were climbing mountains.
Gallivanting. Yeah.
Right. So, but I climbed it was about 21,500 feet. And I just found so many parallels between mountain climbing and life. It's like mountain climbing, high altitude is really hard. And it's not a fast process for the most part. And so you have to, and even to climb a high mountain, you have to spend a lot of time doing nothing leading up to it. You just have to acclimate. So you just get to high-ish altitude and then you wait, you know? So Everest climbers, they'll spend 6 weeks prepping, acclimating their bodies before they actually get to push to do the thing that they were setting out to do. And then when you even go to set out to do it, it's like the slog of mountain climbing. It's like, this is terrible. Every step, you're like, this freaking sucks. I want to turn around. But that moment when you get to the top, makes it all worth it, you know? And so I just personally experienced so many life parallels. Man, how many things in life, big goals that we have, big peaks that we're living towards, and we get impatient and we don't want to spend the time preparing internally, you know, because if you try to rush to the top of a mountain, you'll die. there has to be internal changes to your blood, to your lungs that you can't see, but they have to happen or you can't survive the peak. And so for me, it's just like this parallel of, man, I need to be changing internally. Maybe it feels like I'm not making progress to my goals, but like, am I improving as a person? Am I morphing into who I need to be? So there's like the mystic side of climbing, and the second side of it, man, it's super cool. Not that many people do it. Mm-hmm. There's a certain element of risk, which is what makes it fun. And it's just, I don't know, it's just cool.
How many mountains have you climbed?
Just a few.
What was your favorite one?
Mount Illimani in Bolivia, because I always saw it growing up. And I always wanted to climb it, and it kind of stands alone by itself. So it's just this really big, imposing peak that there's nothing else really around. And you're just like, man, if I was on top of there, I'd feel like I was on top of the world.
That's cool. So how do you prepare? Like, what's the preparation for doing that? And then also, like you said, it's a long process to do. Is it strenuous? Like every step is like your body is hurting, or is it it's more of like you just have to stick with it until you get there?
All of them. It's like, it's strenuous, and you're like, I don't want to do this. Like, you're gasping for air, and this was 21,000 feet. Obviously, the higher you go, the harder it gets. Physical preparation, I would just try to do like in kind of intense workouts, but I kind of knew going to 21,000 feet, that's not like so high that you're likely to die from altitude or something. So I kind of knew it was going to mainly be like just mentally, can I make myself do it versus like my body being able to do it, because so much of mountain climbing is obviously you're going to go climb Everest, you need to get yourself in shape. But like, if you're in reasonable shape and you have the mental fortitude, you should be able to climb a 21,000 foot mountain, And so for me, it was just like, I am choosing to do this or not, Mm-hmm. And honestly, the day we summited that one, I was feeling like crap. It had snowed the night before, so it was hard to walk. Was not feeling it at all. Like when we set off, probably 10 minutes into the hike, I'm like, I'm exhausted.
Dang.
And I was kind of like all over the place. And then at some point, my guide was like, I don't know. He's like, you got to get it together, man. He's like, you're all over the place. He's like, just put your head down and follow my pace, Another good analogy there. Always good to have someone experienced that's better than you, has more knowledge than you, that you just shut up, you hear what they have to say, and you just put your head down and step where they step.
How long was that process, climbing that mountain? Was it like a day or?
No, it was like a 3-day event, sort of, maybe 4, depending on how you look at it.
So you hike for a while and then?
Yeah, you drive,
sleep in a
and then
tent.
you hike, and you sleep, and you hike more halfway up the next day, sleep in another tent, the rest of the way up the next day, and then depending on how you feel, you either go all the way down or you go halfway down.
Cool. And what's it like? Was there in that particular one, was there one moment where you take one last step and then you're like, okay, this is the top?
Not on that mountain, unfortunately. That one kind of has just a rounded top, so you just kind of like
you're at the top for a few steps for a little while, but yeah.
And also it was snowing and like cloudy, so when I actually only knew we were at the top, so the guide was like, we're here. Like looking around like, where are we exactly? But no, it was one of those things. I got down and I was like, I'm never doing that again. And
really?
Then like
after you accomplished this huge thing, and it's like you put on all, after you were done, you're like, I'm never doing that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a couple weeks later, it's like,
I
have to do that again.
Was it like the way your body felt? I'm never doing it, or was it just it wasn't worth it, or what was it?
It was just hard.
Yeah.
I mean, just really hard, and just kind of you're uncomfortable and cold, and it's like there's no like reason you're doing it. It's not like your family's at the top and you have to rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
You're just choosing
not
to do it.
getting paid to do it,
right? So it's like kind of pointless in a weird sense, but also not. So it's like it's really this weird. It's a weird thing to like. I'm not gonna lie.
So are you ready to go climb another one now?
I would love to climb another one now. Hence the picture.
What's the next one? Is that the next one? What mountain was that you posted the picture of?
That mountain's called Amadablam or something. It's in Nepal. It's a really crazy looking mountain. If you look at it very
the picture. If like the picture that he posted it was basically like a couple people, and then on their left side was like an infinite drop, and then on their right side was like an infinite drop. It was like they were walking a tightrope almost, and it was snowing, and they were just like above the cloud. It was crazy.
It is a very crazy picture. It's hard too though, because now with 2 kids, there is this element of like, because even when I was climbing before, we didn't have any kids, but even before the climb, there was part of me that was like, why am I doing this? Like, I have a wife at home. There's no point for me being out here. So I don't know, just being real, I don't know if like, I'd just be picky. I will definitely climb another mountain. I'll just be picky about what it is. Like the one I climbed it for personal reasons. Like I'd seen it growing up, but there was also the fact of it is not like some advanced climb where you're having to just cling to the side of a mountain. It's more of like an endurance steep hike. Mm-hmm. You still have crampons and you're in the snow and ice and you have an ice pick and all this stuff. But realistically, the odds of you dying on a climb like that are no different than if you were to go hike through the Rockies or something. I mean, maybe slightly higher, but they're minuscule.
Well, 21,000 feet, I'm sure there's some additional risk.
But it's not like every year people die climbing this mountain.
Yeah.
So if I were to do another one, it would be something along those lines. There's one, I don't know if I would do that one I put the picture of. Mm-hmm. I would love to think about doing it, but I don't know if I actually would. There's one in, where is it, Kazakhstan I'd like to do. It's called Peak Lenin. And I'd kind of like to do it because it's a little taller. It's like 7,000 meters. So it's kind of like the step up. The last one I did was like 6,500 meters or something. And then I would also like to do Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere. But the nice thing with it, especially with having kids, is that it is, some people say it's super boring. It's literally a long high altitude hike. Like the normal route, there's like no technicality to it. So you're not going to die, but it's going to be mentally hard.
Long trek.
Yeah. So I think that would probably be the next one. Cause with kids, man, the risks reward. It's right. Like, this isn't how I feed my family. Why would I go? I'm not going to go do anything stupid.
Right. So speaking of kids, you have 2 kids. I'm about to have a kid. I need some tips on parenting. How do you do it? How do you keep your kids alive? I'm like thinking about, we're about to have a baby, and then
let me tell you this.
We're supposed to take them home. Like we're supposed to keep them alive. I don't know how to do that.
Here's my overly pragmatic theory. And this probably comes from you've traveled some too. So having traveled a good bit, oftentimes to crazy third world places, and kids survive all over the world. Like it's not like kids are just dying from parental mistakes left and right for like non-obvious things, So I took some of that thought into it of like, okay, obviously I'm nervous, my first kid, but they're not as fragile as people think they are, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think my only advice going back is probably just, I think we've done a pretty good job of this, is just enjoying it. Like, yeah, they're crying, they're tiny, they're crying, and you're sleepy. Okay, like it's going to happen just a couple times in your life, that you're going to have this little tiny baby, and so what, they cry, what else are they supposed to do? They don't know how to do anything else. It's the only way to communicate. I think some people get like too freaked out about like, I'm not getting any sleep. I guess it's just a season. They will eventually start sleeping well, whether it's at 3 months or 6 months or a year or 2 years, but you're only going to have them. Like, I think some people miss that, like, man, this is it. Like this season with your little kids, that's it. You don't ever get it again. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, you may have big career goals. You may want to take over the world with your business, but like, guess what? When your kids start school, man, go grind out work hours, but man, when they're like 1, 2, 3, and just enjoy that time. Like you're never going to be old and be like, man, I wish I would have had 3 more years that I just really pushed into my business, but you might be old and say, darn, I miss when my kids were little and I was working 80-hour work weeks. So that's like kind of one of our pillars is like, man, just obviously there's that balance. You can't just go into cocoon and not do work. But in my opinion, especially when they're young, like, man, just relax. just
How old are
try
your
to
kids
be
right
present. 3.5 and 1.5.
Okay. So what is your normal balance on work and spending time with them? Like, are you working 5 days a week or half a days, or what's your...
Well, our work is different. I mean, normally I get up with the girls because the youngest one still doesn't sleep well. So I'll get up like 6:30ish and get them going, and I normally start working, answering emails at least right when I get up. And then throughout the day, it just kind of depends. Abby will normally bring the girls by, whatever project we're working on. Or I'll try to grab lunch with them, or we go grab coffee in the middle of the day. It's kind of fluid,
Mm-hmm.
Some people probably think I don't work because like I try to be around Abby and the girls as much as I can while still getting stuff done. And then in the evening, honestly, Abby and I normally we get the girls down at 7:30, and the next couple hours we're going over work stuff, So it's weird 'cause it's not 8 to 5. You work for yourself, so it's kind of like you're kind of always working, and you're kind of not always working.
Yeah.
Or you're kind of always not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of whatever you need to do.
I know people talk a lot about having like the work-life balance and things like that, but I've heard a few people, especially recently, talk about like there's no work life and life.
Right.
It's just like your life.
It's just life,
and
right.
So you just do it all.
Right.
And then you make time for the most important things.
Right.
And then, fill in the gaps with the other stuff.
Yeah, it's like I'll always bring Jessa to Home Depot, and she likes going there. So it's like I get to if I have to go pick stuff up, a lot of times I'll bring her because it slows me down, sure, but it's also the larger rock is time with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
So I get to kind of do both at one time.
I'm curious to know if there's one thing, or maybe there's like a million, or maybe there's zero thing that is completely different as a parent than what you thought it would be before you had kids.
I think that...
Is there something you totally just thought, you just totally got it wrong, and it's totally the different?
No, I wouldn't think so. I had no expectations. I was the youngest. I was never around little kids. I had zero expectations, honestly. I think one of the weird things, it's probably going to sound, maybe it won't sound weird, but is like how much you can love this little kid. And like you really do grasp, like, man, no matter how bratty your kid is, no matter how like frustrated you are, they won't stop crying. Like it doesn't matter. Like you might be frustrated, but like your level of love for them doesn't change. It gives you a really good spiritual perspective of like I've had some, just being transparent, I've had some like emotional spiritual moments when like something in my soul finally grasps that like, hey, the way that I feel about this little girl is like the way that God feels about me, and it really can drastically affect your spiritual life. And the second, so that's been one thing, is like just so many spiritual parallels, especially I think as a father, like we always read about God as the father. And so now being a father, it's like you just get it. You're like, whoa, okay. Nothing your kid can ever do. Like your kid could spit in your face and literally say the worst things to you and just disregard you, and you still would be like, come give me a hug.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, I think going through life, sometimes we look at big milestones and we think that like that milestone is going to make us feel different, like, oh, well, when I'm married. And so we envision this world of like, oh, when I'm married, I'm like going to be transformed into a different person. Oh, when I'm a parent, I'll then be transformed into this person. I mean, you are who you are. So like when you have a kid, you still feel like you, and you start realizing that like, that's also how your parents feel. Like your parents don't feel like your parents, if that makes sense. They just feel like them. Mm-hmm. So you start to view, I think, your parents a little bit differently, because you're like, man, they don't feel however old they are. My parents don't feel 65-ish. They just feel like them. And then because you feel that way too. And so you're not like magically, in my experience, you're not just going to be like, oh my God, I'm a father now. I'm all wise. So like your issues are still your issues. You got problems. They're still there. In fact, they're probably magnified now because you're going to be a little bit more stressed and have less sleep. So it doesn't change. It changes you, but it doesn't change you. So like only you change you. And that to me has been like a takeaway. Like, man, if I want to change my issues, I got to fix my issues. There's no magical summit that's going, when I reach it, it's going to to alter my like internal character, if that makes sense. So I think it's been another takeaway. It's, you know, and my third takeaway with kids is just perspective. Like once you have your kids, you start thinking like, man, at the end of the day, if you have some huge business, but like your kids don't like you or don't know you, like who cares? Like who cares? You die. And then like, does anyone care? Just take, I'm trying to think of some company that's been around a while. Let's just take, this is probably not even accurate. Let's take like the Empire State Building. And let's say you were the guy that like, I'm going to buy this land and build the Empire State Building. No one even knows who you, 50 years from now, no one's going to know who you are, much less care. They might be like, oh, that's a cool building. Like no one's going to care. Whereas if you had kids and you poured into them and then they have grandkids and you've poured into them. And now you're like this patriarch of all these people that flow from you with all of like whatever character things you were able to ingrain into them in this culture. Like, and that's a legacy. A legacy is not like some dumb business that nobody cares about. A legacy is like those close to you and what you pour into them, you know?
Cool. And they could build like 50 Empire State Buildings. Right.
But then the funny thing is, you as their parent, you won't give a crap. Like, you might have one that built the Empire State Building and you're like, wow, I'm so proud of you. And you might have one that's like a vet and you're like, I'm equally proud of you. It's kind of like in that book, The Shack, Love It or Hate It, where the God character of every person that comes up, the God character says, oh, I'm especially fond of them. And it's like you realize that with your kids. You're like, they're totally different. And this one might be really well behaved. This one might be more difficult. But you're like, oh, I'm especially fond of Jessa. Oh, I'm especially fond of Kinley. And it's like there's no conflict. It's just different.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. At the risk of getting too deep or too personal, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave?
I want to leave a legacy of like a few things, but one that always comes to mind first is just generosity. I think that that's one of the most important things you can have, you know, because I feel like if you're generous, then it means that you're keeping a proper perspective, you're keeping a loose grip on money, and you're keeping an eternal perspective on like what's important, you know, which is people. So to me, if a baseline is I'm going to be generous, then that's probably going to keep your course pretty correct. So generous, but also I think like an overcoming attitude. Of my personal life word is just the word relentless, and it's like I feel like you really can accomplish whatever it is in life, whether it's good relationships or a business or whatever the thing is that you're focused on. It can be multiple things, but if you just don't give up, you can have those things. Like if you have a kid that's really hard to deal with, man, if you just don't give up as the parent and you just love that kid relentlessly, man, you're going to end up with a relationship with that kid. You know, if you have a business, if you just don't give up and you truly pursue it, then maybe that business doesn't work, but you're going to transform, and then maybe your next one works, you know? So to me, it's just that not giving up attitude. And then the final one, legacy, I'd like to just be a legacy of, you know, character and integrity. Because to me, those are like the key. If you don't have that, like who cares? If you get rich by scamming people, who cares? You know, if you're paint this great business face, but at home with your family, you're a monster or you're not present, man, who cares? You know, if I can't look you in the eyes and say, and trust you to do what you tell me you're going to do, like what kind of legacy is that? You know? So to me, that'd probably be the most important thing. When I'm dead one day at my funeral, I hope people would say, my God, that guy was generous. He never gave up. And if he said he was going to do it, he did it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I got like one more question, because I do want to talk about the compassion that the nonprofit that you have.
Yeah.
And that was like actually a perfect segue just for a couple more minutes. So you have a nonprofit, Compassion United, and I want to kind of hear what your vision is, what you've done, and then what your vision is for that. Because then I think that what you just articulated so awesome, which would have been a perfect ending point to the podcast, which was like so powerful and awesome. But I think that's kind of the reason that you have this, and the reason, and like a lot of what you just mentioned, is you will hopefully be able to accomplish and then spread across a lot of people with the nonprofit.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So really, the reason I got into real estate was because I want to do nonprofit stuff. But I just have always had this dream of I want to do nonprofit stuff, but I do not want to pull a salary, and I want to be able to run an organization with no personal financial attachment to it, so that I can just do what's best, without it providing my bread for my table. Long story short, I finally do have a nonprofit, Compassion United, and the goal over the years has kind of transitioned into this thing where I know there's large organizations that are doing good work, but I also, through personal experience, have learned that there's lots of people out there that are doing really great things in really rough areas, but just nobody knows what they're doing. And so their struggle oftentimes is like, I know of these people in Mexico, and every month they're they have next to no money, but they're caring for 40 kids that have been rescued out of human trafficking, horrific stories. When you hear them, you think that it can't be real. And yet they're caring for these 40 kids, but no one really knows that they're doing it. And so there's probably people over here that would love to give if they were told these people's story in a compelling way, but there's this disconnect. So I ultimately want Compassion United to be essentially a brokerage for projects where you can come to Compassion United's website or whatever and click on any country in the world and get a list of whether local or Western people doing missions work in these countries, and you can see a little video about their project, a little bio about the person, and you can know that they've been vetted as much as as much as you can vet someone overseas, and when you give, it will actually go to that project. And then I'd also love to be able to connect, I guess, through social media, where you can now begin to communicate with this person, so you can feel that personal connection. So that's what I would like to build it into.
Cool. And tell me quickly, because I know you got to go, what's kind of some of the projects that you've been involved with and been involved in recently? I know you just went to Nepal last year.
Yeah, we did Nepal. Full transparency, we were raising money for a safe house over there, but we weren't able to raise enough money. But that was the goal. And I've worked with, of course, the people in Mexico a good bit. Those are kind of the two that we've mainly worked with. And there's a guy, I want to go over there, visit him still, the guy in Kenya. Mm-hmm. So that's, it's not a lot right now, but that's my heart.
Cool. That's cool. Well, I'll definitely let you get out of here. I appreciate you talking to me. I feel like we could talk for another couple hours because it was really, really cool. But I appreciate it. Adam Pitts, real estate mogul and legacy leaver. Was that our themes for
That was good.
Cool.
And now Chase knows a few more things.
I know a few more things for sure. Definitely. Some big things I think that I could take away from that too. So I appreciate your time.
All right.
Thanks a lot, dude.
No problem, man.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Chase Doesn't Know podcast. If you've listened to all 3 episodes, wow, props to you. Please message me on Instagram, and I will personally buy you a meal at Raising Cane's. Speaking of, Raising Cane's did sponsor indirectly and unofficially this episode again of the Chase Doesn't Know podcast. And if you're interested to see some of the things that Adam Pitts and his wife are working on, you can follow them on their Instagram account. Their Instagram handle is Flipped Pitts, and that's Pitts with 2 T's. They post some things that they're working on. Always cool to see before and after pictures. Very, very cool. Anyways, thanks again for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.